Chapter 3. Ripley rubbed at her temples, frowned slightly. "Problem?" Wilks whispered. He didn't want to disturb the woman concentrating at the console a couple of meters away. "Headache," she said. "I get 'em a lot lately." She gave up her self-massage and looked around the small cubicle. The tasteful paintings and prints seemed out of place next to the cheap, built-in furnishings. The tech, Leslie Elliott, had agreed to help them, volunteering her lunch break to dig for their information. They sat now in her cube, watching her work. She was an attractive woman, tightly muscled, with an easy smile and reddish-brown hair that she wore in tiny braids. Ripley wondered how well she and Wilks were acquainted. "Maybe you should stop by medical," said Wilks, interrupting her thought. Ripley looked at him blankly. "Your headache?" "Oh, no, I'm fine. Besides, I don't do medics. Most problems seem to fix themselves." Wilks seemed about to say something else when Leslie turned in her chair and grinned. "You owe me for this, Sarge," she said. "If you've got something." Leslie's grin widened. "Gold mine is what I've got. Just got to ask the right questions. Hold on a sec. Got to store these where we can find them and nobody will stumble across them." Ripley smiled at Wilks. "Okay, so maybe you aren't totally crazy," he said. Ripley and Wilks walked towards Ripley's quarters. The smell of canned air seemed particularly stale in this corridor, a metallic tang that you could almost taste. Wilks thought about the conversation they'd just had with Les. Only a few of the dreamers seemed to be linear-minded, Leslie had said, tapping the keys expertly as she talked. You know, math science, left brain types. Guys like you, Sarge. No imagination. Fuck you. You wish. Anyway, it stands to reason that they would have a better fix on charting a map. If you told me what you were looking for last night, you could have saved yourselves a trip. Actually, we're making this up as we go along, Ripley said. Even so, they had the names of people who could describe the aliens' planet. 6 in all. Their details were vague, but Leslie had cross-referenced a known systems map and come up with several possible locations. Ripley said she figured they could narrow it down if they could talk to the 6. This telepathy-empathy stuff was tricky, but it was what they had to work with. Wilks was still willing to go along for the ride, given that something had turned up. Weird, but there it was. "I thought we blew their goddamn planet out of space," Wilks said. "I dropped chain-linked nukes that should have scrapped the whole fucking surface clean." "Doesn't matter," said Ripley. "They spawn wherever they are, and a planet overrun is a planet overrun." "Yeah, but this one, wherever it is, appears to be the core. Makes me wonder how many places are seeded." He trailed off, remembering the conversation with the old soldier in the bar. "Something?" Ripley said. "Yeah. A few days after Billie and I got here, I met this old man at the bar, name of Crane. He was ex-military and very drunk. Wanted to buy every uniform in the place a drink. He rambled. Glory days and dead soldiers, shit like that. I didn't pay much attention until he started talking about the aliens. He called them war toys. Said that they were too good at surviving to be natural." Ripley turned to look at Wilks. "Interesting," she said, considering for a minute. "Rapid procreative ability, acid blood, vacuum resistant. It would explain a hell of a lot if they were designed that way." Wilks nodded. "Worth thinking about anyway. Course, then the questions get worse. Who designed the fucking things? Why? What do they have in mind?" They stopped in front of Ripley's quarters. "I'll catch up to you and Billie later," he said. "I've got some things to check out." Ripley shut the door and thought about Wilkes's second-hand theory. War toys. What insane species could have come up with the alien design? What kind of war could have warranted it? Her headache was coming back. There was a knock at Ripley's door. "Come in." Billie stepped in and glanced around at the bare walls of the older woman's room. Efficient and practical, like Ripley, who sat at a desk staring at the console in front of her. She looked weary. "Hey, Billie," she said, swiveling in her chair. "Anything?" 18 military affiliated, maybe half of them trained in combat, she said. She leaned on the desk. She was on the tired side herself. "Good. Wilks and I got some stuff from his hacker friend that looks promising, so we can get started. We'll have to do background checks on some of these folks and get going on transport. Sooner the better." Billie smiled at Ripley's straightforward confidence in her plan. Must be nice to be so in control, so sure of yourself. "Just out of curiosity," she said, "how did this idea of yours come up?" Ripley shifted in the chair and looked suddenly uncomfortable. "You remember I said I had a daughter?" Billie nodded. "Amanda. She was very young when I left to work on the Nostromo. I promised her I'd come back for her birthday. I didn't make it." Billie nodded again. She knew that part of it. Ripley had spent decades in deep sleep. She held the record as far as anybody knew. It had been a lucky accident that she'd been found at all, drifting through dead space. Billie wondered what it must have been like to leave a child and come back to find that she had died as an old woman. A daughter older than your own grandmother. Awful. On the ship to Gateway, I thought a lot about her whole life passing by while I slept, and the dreams of another mother who wanted her children back. Ripley shook her head and smiled. There was no humour in the expression. Funny comparison. Me and that monstrous creature, both wishing for the same thing. Billie needed to do something. Awkwardly, she reached out and took Ripley's hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "Yeah." Ripley pulled her hand away, not accepting the gesture of comfort. "Anyway, I didn't have any kind of revelation about what to do, no brilliant inspiration. I just loved my daughter and I miss her, and I blame that thing for taking her away." She looked up at Billie, her eyes angry. "My idea didn't come from wanting to save anyone. No great love for humanity. I just hate her and her whole fucking brood, and I want them exterminated." She took a deep breath and dropped her gaze, then shrugged. "Enough history. We have a lot to do." Billie wondered how old the child had been. Amy's age, perhaps. Something that all three of them had in common then. Ripley, Billie, and the alien queen. Just wanting their children. No, Amy wasn't her child. Just a face on a view screen. Don't think of her that way. Billie moved a chair over to Ripley's desk and sat beside her. There would be time to sort through the reasons later. For now, Ripley was right. There was a lot of work to be done. After 2 weeks of hanging around, the idea didn't seem so bad. Doing nothing was always worse than doing just about anything.